Rain claws the night like it holds a grudge. Branches whip, slick and mean, and she runs barefoot because boots make noise, and noise gets you found. Mud sucks at her heels as if the earth itself wants her back in the dark it understands. The cut at her ankle is new, sharp, wet, blooming, and every step paints the trail she's trying to erase. Breath burns ragged in her throat. She swallows it anyway. She keeps moving. The forest is a living thing tonight. The canopy hammers with rain, and the wind slides low, carrying every scent it can steal. Bark, cold iron from the old rail line. Ozone that tastes like storm-bitten copper. And behind her, fainter, but there, wolves. Not the wild kind, the kind that remember names. Lightning licks the sky and holds just long enough to show her the ground. Stones shining like teeth. Roots slick as snakes. She threads through them, shoulder brushing a trunk, bark rasping skin. She doesn't flinch. Pain is a lesson. She learned it young. She vaults a deadfall, skids, steadies with one hand in the dirt. The soil is cold and clean and indifferent. She has missed that kind of honesty. Her pulse keeps time with the storm. She wishes it were quieter. She wishes a lot of things, like not bleeding, like not smelling like fear, like never having heard his voice on the cliff 2 winters back saying what he said. But wishing is soft, and soft gets crushed. She angles downslope where the creek swells into a mean gray ribbon, loud enough to swallow footsteps, loud enough to drown a name. Her name? They're saying it somewhere behind her, pulled thin by the rain, stretched into something not quite human. She doesn't look back. Not because she isn't curious, she always is, but because the body follows the eyes, and tonight, the body has to live. She tucks her chin, narrows her profile, and slides along a spine of rock slick as glass. The creek throws mist in her face. It smells like thaw and iron and a promise to take her if she slips. She won't slip. The first voice is close enough that her body answers before her mind does. Every hair along her arms rises. The silver thing in her chest, dormant most days, quiet like an ember at the bottom of a hearth, flares without flames. A low-pressure light pushing outward from sternum to ribs. Not enough to warm, enough to ache. She clamps down on it the way she was taught, jaw tight, tongue pressed to the roof of her mouth, breath held until the urge to burn passes. It doesn't pass. It banks, and that's worse. Banked fire goes looking for air. She needs cover. The cliff face looms to her right, not high, but jagged, like the earth split and then changed its mind. There's a cut in it, a black slash that might be a shadow or a hollow. She presses flat to rock, fingers slipping over lichen and wet grit. And she slides into the dark space with the kind of caution that only comes from having been found before. The hollow opens just enough to crouch. The ceiling drips cold. The back wall is seamed and damp. She fits herself into that seam like the stone might remember her. Sound changes when you hide. It gets big. The rain is louder. Her heartbeat is all drum. The creek swallows and swallows, greedy. And underneath all of it, the quiet pad of paws becoming the rhythm of a run. Then slowing, then stopping. She makes herself smaller. She can do that. Shrink without curling. Breathe without noise. Lock her body until even the shiver of restraint reads as stone. Her palms sting where they scraped. She doesn't wipe the blood away. Blood is information. Let the rain handle it. A scent threads through the storm. Fur, wet leather, the old cedar smoke that clung to everything in the den. Memory hurts worse than the ankle. She grips it the way a climber grips a ledge. Don't look down. Don't look back. Don't say his name, not even in her head, because names are doors, and the night is full of hands waiting to open them. The voices argue. One wants the chase done clean, one wants it ugly. She recognizes both. Packs are always two minds at least. The ugly voice says she isn't worth the risk. Too hot, too strange, too much trouble at the wrong time. The clean voice, calm and cruel like a winter river, says the law is the law, and if she returns on her knees. She listens to the words and not the tone, because tone is where hope hides. There is none. Lightning again. It rips white along the cliff and turns the rain into spears. In the brief flare, she sees her breath cloud and vanish, sees the drip on the cave lip become a quick silver bead that drops and makes a sound too loud. It hits the stone by her knee and pops like a firecracker in her head. She doesn't move. The puddle that catches it shakes, then stills. Her throat is tight. She swallows anyway. She is not a deer. She will not bolt because a twig snapped. The pad of paws is closer now. One set, then another. Then silence, which is worse. Wolves are generous with sound when they want to scare. They are courteous with silence when they want to kill. She shifts weight in her feet just enough to be ready, counting edges in the dark with her toes. Left toe at a lip, right heel against a wedge. If something lunges, she will pivot and let the body decide the rest. She has always been better at motion than talk. The silver thing in her chest pushes again, expands until her ribs creak. She imagines it as a small, patient star that waited too long to be born. It wants out. She squeezes her hands into fists. Her nails bite her palms. Pain sharpens. The star dims. She pulls air slow through her nose, counting old numbers. 4 in, hold, 4 out. The breath stutters, but she keeps it steady. The trick is not to kill the spark. The trick is to deny it an audience. Somewhere behind the rain, a raven calls. 3 notes. The same pattern she carved into the ash tree when she left the ridge. The tree bled pale sap that smelled lemon bright. She told herself she wouldn't look back. She did, 3 times. She's brave, not perfect. The voices drift, then gather again. Someone swears they saw light. Someone else says lightning makes liars of us all. The clean voice says, still calm, still cruel. If there's a light, it's not hers, because the girl can't hold fire without burning. He's wrong. He's always been half right, which is more dangerous. Time stretches in the dark. Rain redraws the world. The creek fattens. One wolf sniffs close enough that she can map his face by breath alone. Rank meat, old fear, damp leaves. He pants once. The hot exhale hits her shin. Her muscles ache with the effort of not flinching. The wolf's nails click on stone. He huffs again, uncertain, then shifts, and in that small movement she hears it. Not wild, collar. Metal whispers against fur. The smell catches up with the sound. Oil, a smear of human, not his. The enforcer's then. Hired silence in a wilderness that doesn't like it. The rain eases. The night isn't kinder for it. With the loud gone, the small noises grow teeth. Water stitching itself down the cliff face, a single pine bending and straightening in the wind. The far-off thud that might be a falling branch or a distant door closing. The breath of the wolf nearest to her goes tight, then releases. He's bored. He's arrogant. He steps away, and the clean voice says something soft she can't catch. It doesn't matter. The rhythm shifts. The wolves drift, then move, then go, down slope toward the ford, where the banks are easy and the tracks are honest. She waits. She has learned patience one bruise at a time. She counts the beats between thunder and lightning. She tastes the air for the bite that means someone stayed behind. When she's sure the only heart near her is her own, She lets her fists unclench. Blood tackies on her palms. She lifts one hand to her mouth and licks the iron away because the forest takes everything and she will not leave more than she must. Her ankle throbs in pulses that sink to the creek. She studies it without looking. The cut is shallow but long. She can feel the warmth of an edge that wasn't clean. A rock did it, sure. But the reason she caught it was simple. She looked up when she should have looked down because the scent hit her, and memory cost her skin. She files that away. Memory is a luxury. Tonight, it's a trap. She edges out of the hollow like she'll spook the dark if she moves too fast. A fresh wind slides along the cliff and lifts the hair at her neck. She listens again, then drops into a crouch and scuttles from shadow to shadow, hugging the rock as if it loves her. The ground is slicker now. The rain polished it to glass. She spreads her toes for grip and places each step like a secret. The creek throws mist and noise and the promise of cold numbness if she needs it. She doesn't. Not yet. A tangle of roots makes a low arch she could worm under. She does, shoulders brushing damp curl and knotted bark that feels like old scars. On the far side, the forest opens a little, still close, still heavy, but the trees stand farther apart, and the ground gives underfoot with a tenderness that surprises her. Moss. It drinks the rain, holds it, then offers it back in a fine, cold breath. The smell of it is clean enough to make her throat ache. She keeps to the line where darkness thickens, close enough to see the creek's pale skin, far enough to vanish when lightning climbs the sky. Her mind catalogs escape lines without conscious effort. That broken birch where the bark peels like old paper. The flint spark of rock at the bend, the scatter of stones that could roll if she kicks them. She builds the map as she moves because maps keep panic small. The silver inside her turns again. Not a flare now, but a coil, then a slow expansion that feels almost like calm. Not safe, never that, but steady. She puts a palm flat to her sternum and presses hard until the urge to open and burn eases. She can't be seen, not like that, not here. A shape lifts from the night ahead. At first, just brinked shadow, then more, the suggestion of height and patience. The old watchstone. She knows it. Everyone does. It's where boys first shift and girls first learn the language elders use when they want to call you dangerous without saying the word. She shouldn't go near it. She's going anyway. The ledge under it is narrow and half broken. The alcove below it is deep and dry, a pocket the storm can't find. She slides along the ledge, weight centered, breath thin, and drops into the pocket with a thud she can't soften. Dust flares, faint and sweet. Old pollen, old bones, old stories. She wipes her palms on her thighs and lets herself fold down, back to stone, knees to chest. Arms wrapped tight around shins to hold the shake where it belongs, inside, where no one can hear it. The forest accepts her. It doesn't comfort. It never has. It simply presses its chill against her skin until her heat gives up arguing. Her breath fogs in the hollow space and fades. Outside, the creek gets mean with a new surge. A twig snaps, not near, not far. Her muscles lift her before she tells them to. She holds still, head angled, listening like a predator and a prayer at once. It's nothing. It's everything. The night is full of both. Her mind drifts to the last door she closed. Cedar frame, rusted latch, her hand on old wood, wondering if hands remember. She left a note under the bread tin. She didn't sign it. She couldn't. Words mean proof. Proof means someone angry survives long enough to use it. Still, she wrote one thing she had never said aloud. I don't want to hurt you. Sometimes wanting is also a knife. The silver spark pulses, then settles low, like an animal curling in straw. She lets her forehead rest on her knees. The rain slows. The forest breathes. She counts heartbeats not to calm down, but to mark time. She will leave when she reaches a number that feels like a door opening. She reaches it at the same moment the smell hits. Smoke, wet leather, and something colder, cleaner, like frost on steel. He stands at the edge of the pocket, one hand on the stone above, rain combed from his hair by wind, eyes lit in the kind of light that doesn't belong to weather. She doesn't lift her head, doesn't make herself a target by hope. She looks at the scuffed toe of his boot instead, at the scratch of grit on worn leather. He doesn't speak. The night leans toward them like it wants the first word. Her body answers what her mouth won't. The silver inside her climbs, hot enough to make the air waver. She presses her palm to her chest so hard her bones complain. The pain gives her a kind of anchor. He shifts his weight, barely, enough to make the leather creak, enough for the cliff to drip a new pace beside him. He still doesn't speak. Maybe he learned silence after he used words to cut her. Maybe he learned nothing at all. She hates that she wants to know. She hates that her hands remember the precise distance between his shoulders. He steps down into the pocket, slow, careful, taking the dark's measure like it might bite. He keeps his hands in sight because he knows what fear is, and he has seen what power does to a scared person. His face is cleaner than the last time she saw it. No blood, no ash. But the lines at the corners of his mouth are deeper, and there's sleep somewhere he didn't get. He stops far enough away that she can run. Close enough that running comes with a risk. The night steadies around them. The creek argues in the background. The watchstone remembers everything and says nothing. He looks at her like a man checking a wound he gave himself in a life he can't admit is still his. She keeps her eyes on the laces of his boots, then lifts them to his hands, then finally to his face. The light in his eyes isn't anger. It isn't kindness. It's recognition dragged over a gravel road and made to stand anyway. She doesn't ask what he wants. Want is obvious. Want is what makes men climb cliffs in storms. Want is what makes women bleed and still keep moving. She asks the thing that matters in a voice that sounds like someone else's. Are you alone? His jaw works. He nods. She doesn't believe him. He knows she doesn't. He takes one more step and stops where the ledge narrows to nothing. He lowers himself into a crouch, not to her level, but close enough that his breath fog meets hers and they cancel each other in a faint, temporary truce. He studies her like he has more time than he deserves. He speaks, finally, and his voice is rough from disuse or from everything he didn't say for too long. Don't run, he says. She almost laughs. It comes out as a small exhale that might be a ghost of one. Tell your dogs, she says, without looking away. Gone, he answers. Not a lie, not the whole truth. She can smell others down slope, cutting the river's stink with their own. She can smell iron and anger and a plan built by men who think the forest belongs to them because they keep records. She shifts her weight because being still makes her feel nailed down. He notices. He always did. He lifts his empty hands a hair higher, a nothing gesture that still reads as peace. The silver inside her reaches upward again, a plant toward a window. She lets it touch her skin from the inside. The warming is small, like a candle 2 rooms away. She could make it bigger, She could light everything and force the night to choose. Not yet. Not for him. Not because he asked. Rain beads on his lashes and doesn't fall. He blinks it away. Somewhere far behind him, someone curses softly and the sound cuts off. Time folds. The pocket of stone is too small for everything in it. History, fear, heat, the constant hum of a thing inside her that is tired of being good. He knows nothing about tired. Or maybe he does. That thought is worse than the others. He says her name. He says it low and careful, like the syllables might bite him. The name is a stone she carries in the back of her mouth. She refuses to spit it out. He waits for an answer. She lets the silence fill with the rain's soft applause. He tries again, softer. The sound of it breaks something that wasn't a wall, but a thin ice over deep water. The water is cold. It's honest. It numbs quickly. "You shouldn't be here," he says. She smiles without showing any teeth. "That makes two of us." "Let me—" He stops. The sentence fights him. He swallows it and tries again. "You're bleeding." "Not enough to matter." "It matters to them." She hears what he isn't saying and moves it into the space between them. "And to you?" He doesn't flinch. That would be mercy. He doesn't look away. That would be a lie. He just holds her gaze and lets whatever answers crowd inside him show in his face. Something like regret. Something like hunger. Something like grief for a choice he keeps making. Every day he wakes up alpha and remembers what it costs. The night is greedy. It eats details. But not this one. This one sticks. She doesn't have time for it. A flicker of light scuds over the creek, thin as breath. Not lightning. Lantern. Distant, but moving. The wolves downslope have friends who walk on 2 feet. She lifts a hand without thinking, palm outward, a denial to the light and to him and to the whole idea that any of this was supposed to be easy. The silver inside her answers the gesture with a quick, painful flare. He sees it. His eyes go sharp, not with fear, never with that, but with attention that means calculation. She hates him for it and admires him too. She is built for contradictions. He taught her that. "Take the ridge path," he says, voice back to command, back to the shape it takes when the pack is listening. "It winds and doubles. They'll miss you at the turn. There's a dead spruce with a split trunk. Inside, there's a narrow pass. You won't like it." "Good," she says. "I don't like anything." He almost smiles. The storm leans in to hear if he will. He doesn't. He points with his chin toward the line of rock behind her. "You'll have to jump the old fault," he adds. The gap widened. "Because of what?" she asks, and regretting the curiosity feels like a luxury she doesn't have. He knows it. He answers anyway. "Because the ground doesn't care if we live," he says. "And because you were gone when it cracked. There it is. The knife. The bloodless kind." He offers it like an apology he won't say. She stands. The pocket is too small for the motion and the moment. It scrapes both. She plants her hand on the ledge, tests the wet grip, and looks past him into a night that will take every piece of her she gives and still ask for more. She could ask him to come. She could ask him to leave. She could ask him why he said what he said on the cliff 2 winters back, when the snow turned every sound into a cathedral echo. She asks none of it. The lantern light downslope grows. The wolves shift. The creek swells. The silver inside her rolls like thunder with nowhere to go. She moves to climb. He steps aside. The ledge is slick. She feels the stone's refusal and asks anyway. It holds. She pulls herself up and out, the rain cool hands on her face. The forest greets her like it always has, rough, true, without favor. She doesn't look back. The body follows the eyes. She keeps hers on the line of darker dark that points toward the ridge. Wind carries his voice to her before the forest eats it. Not a command, not a plea. "Don't stop," he says. She doesn't answer. The ridge waits, and the dead spruce, and the narrow pass she will hate and take anyway. The gap will be wider. She will jump it. And downslope, men with lanterns believe light keeps them safe from things that burn. She moves because moving is the only prayer that has ever worked. Her ankle complains. Her lungs pull knives and turn them into air. The forest opens a fraction, enough for a sliver of sky to show a bruised belly. The storm limps toward the horizon. The creek falls behind, muttering. The ground rises, then drops, then rises again, and each step is a choice she refuses to surrender. The dead spruce finds her the way old dangers do, unexpectedly obvious once you're too close to change your mind. The trunk splits like a mouth daring her to argue. She slides in sideways, shoulders scraping resin-slick wood, breath shallow. The pass is tighter than memory. It smells like pitch and the soft green of needles crushed long ago. On the far side, the world narrows to the fault. The gap is darker than dark, breathing cold up from where rock broke rock. She edges to it, toes looking for the line they can trust. Wind knifes up and steals the heat from her shins. She waits until her weight and the night agree on a number, then bends knees, sets jaw, and jumps. For a heartbeat, there's no rain, no wolves, no voice, no cliff, no den, no symbol cut into stone. Only the simple honesty of air and the body suspended in it, the silver inside her reaching, wanting, not getting what it asked for and learning, again, how to live with that. She lands. The far ledge is meaner and smaller than it pretended to be. Her foot skates, her hand slaps stone, her skin remembers blood and offers more. She breathes once, a punch of sound more than an inhale, and keeps going, because forward is still forward even when it hurts. The ridge path threads out in front of her like a scar, ugly, honest, healed enough to hold. Behind her, the lantern light huffs and dies as the wind takes it. The wolves circle and find nothing but rain and stone and the ghost of a girl who refuses to be ghosted. The silver fire in her chest presses up one last time, looking for a door. She gives it none, not yet, not for them. She tips her head toward the storm-raw sky and lets the rain wash the last of the den from her hair. The words she's been keeping on the back of her tongue finally make a tiny shape in the dark. No witness but the trees, no judge but the cold, no jury but the miles she hasn't run yet. "If I stop now," she whispers, voice steady in a way that has nothing to do with calm and everything to do with decision. They win. If you're holding your breath with her right now, subscribe to Author Sloan, because you'll never forget where this story takes you. The ridge path tightens into a thread. Wind scrapes along the stone, cold and testing, and the storm loosens its grip just enough for fog to gather low and thick, a rolling, stubborn white that makes distance lie. She keeps moving because the body that stops becomes a story someone else tells. Pine breath lingers in her mouth. Sap on her fingers tackies, then goes slick with rain. Her ankle talks with every step, a steady, irritating voice she refuses to answer. The fog reshapes the world into a handful of shapes and 100 dangers. She listens more than she looks. Air slurring through needles, the faint drag of water across rock, that subtle hitch in the breeze when a body interrupts it. Her shoulders tighten a heartbeat before her senses explain why. Scent hits first, quick and precise. Wet leather with heat under it, Cedar smoke ironed flat by rain, the clean bite of a storm that never forgets your name. The smell cuts through memory's mess and plants a stake. Him. He steps out of the fog like the weather built him and then regretted it. Coat torn, jaw set, eyes bright with that amber that isn't color so much as warning. His posture is a locked door. Rage sits in the way he holds still. He looks like a decision he hasn't forgiven himself for. She knows him with the part of her that never learned to lie. Nerve endings sharpen, every instinct splits, run and strike, hide and howl. Her mouth goes dry. The silver inside her leans toward him like iron toward a field it can't see but feels in the bone. She hates that pull. She hates that it steadies her. He says her name, not thrown, not shouted, placed. The sound lands between them and sinks. He has practiced the shape of it. He has ruined the inside of his cheek on consonants he has no right to keep. Her body answers first. Shoulders blade back, chin angles, teeth bare, not for spectacle, but for promise. She steps sideways, not away, giving herself the kind of space that can become a strike. He tracks the shift without moving his feet, weight deep in the wet earth. Hands empty and open in front of him, as if he remembers what fear does to a mind that was trained to survive. "You shouldn't have come back," he says. The words arrive stripped of apology, dressed in duty, carrying the exact edge that sliced her 2 winters ago, on that cliff where snow hushed the world so his voice could carry farther. She breathes once through her nose so she can smell the truth inside the sentence. There's duty. There's anger. There's something under both that doesn't change the fact that he said it. The fog makes his face a study in remnant light and shadow, a scar at his cheekbone she doesn't know. The stiff set at his mouth, like he hasn't slept properly since choosing the version of himself that fits the title. "You told me once," she says, quiet, "that the territory ends where the river forgets our names." She nods toward the rise where the creek became torrent. "Looks like the river forgot you first." He doesn't take the bait. He never did when it mattered. His eyes shift past her left shoulder, the smallest, ugliest tell of a man who has brought more than his mouth to the meeting. She pivots with it, low and fast, just as a body flinches from the fog and lunges. The enforcer's weight is all shoulder, no brain. He hits where she was, teeth snapping air, claws skittering sparks off stone. She grabs the back of his head as he slips, twists, drives his face to rock, and uses his momentum to sling herself clear. Another one comes in from the right, smarter, using the wet ground and the fog like friends. She gives ground, not panic, calculated inches, so his strike extends, then falls short when she stops, and he doesn't. He tumbles. The first tries to rise, shakes blood and rain out of his eyes, and meets a boot, not hers. The alpha just moved, too fast for fog, too clean for rage, and bone makes that blunt sound bodies make when skill chooses where to hurt. The enforcer drops and stays dropped. The third thinks he's patient, thinks he's clever, thinks he can circle and take soft tissue while attention points forward. She hears the pad, counts the delay, lets her right knee dip until muscle complains, then snaps a heel back into a low jaw. The shock bites her ankle and climbs. He yelps, dog, not wolf, and that insult is what wakes the alpha's fury. It doesn't roar. It doesn't announce itself. It compresses. The ground seems to lean toward him. When his hands land, they land like finality. He grabs the third by the scruff and waist, lifts, and throws him into the tree line where the trunk catches ribs that will tell the weather story for a season. Silence tries to return and can't quite make it. The fog inhales, then exhales against bark. The rain ceases for 3 heartbeats and starts again. Their breath paints the air with quick ghosts that don't have time to drift. She keeps her stance because you don't drop guard while the body is still writing instructions to the blood. He stands as if his weight belongs to the earth and the earth is grateful. They are close now because violence did what it does, pulled distance apart and then shoved it back together. Heat rolls off him. Her skin answers against her will. The silver inside her presses forward, curious, then angry at itself for being curious. Their heartbeats find the same narrow lane and run it. She hates how easy that rhythm is. He must hear it too, because his gaze flickers to the quick beneath her jaw and comes back with a control that costs him. He doesn't say, "Good job." He doesn't say, "Are you hurt?" He doesn't reach, because reaching is a ritual, and rituals bind more than bodies. He watches her like a starving man studying a table he knows will get him killed. "Why save me now?" She doesn't lace it with thanks or accusation. She leaves it exactly as heavy as it is. He could lie. He could dress the truth. He could make a speech about territory and elders and risk. He says nothing. The nothing gathers every choice he's made since the cliff and arranges them in the space between their feet. Rain patters at the edges of his silence like it wants in. Something shifts in the fog behind them. Not a strike, an audience. She tilts her head enough to taste the direction. He doesn't turn. That's the tell that matters. He knows what watches and from where. He knows how little time they have and how broad the net is when men who fear fire start drawing lines. "The ridge turns," he says, voice low, jaw tight. "If you hug the inside, it hides you from the road. They expect the outer path." They're already waiting at the break. "And you are here because—" She lets it trail because all the explanations she can imagine end at a cliff with fresh snow and a younger girl choking on the taste of her own name. "Because I know where they stand," he says. "And I broke the ones who came early." A shade of humor ghosts his mouth at the last word like he surprised himself. It doesn't stay. "You can hate me from the other side of the turn. It's safer there." The words land like a map he's too proud to hand her and too stubborn not to draw. He stands square with the path she needs. She can smell the exhaustion in him now, hidden under wet leather, the kind that lives in bone, the kind you can only get by staying too long in a role that eats all the other versions of you. She could acknowledge it. She doesn't. Mercy is a luxury, and tonight she spends nothing on him. She moves to pass. He shifts half a step, instinctively blocking, then arrests the motion, lets her in that knife-thin lane of space where bodies almost touch. The closeness is its own fight. Heat licks along her forearm where his coat brushes. The silver in her chest drags its nails up her sternum like it wants out, and it wants him, and those are not the same thing. But tonight, they feel dangerously close. She tightens her jaw until the impulse turns to ache. He breathes in, just once, just enough to pull her scent across his tongue, then stills like he despises himself for it. Something in his face softens and hardens at the same time. There's a memory there. It cuts him. She keeps moving because stopping would mean naming it. The enforcer she slammed wakes enough to make a stupid sound. The alpha doesn't look at him. "Stay down," he says without turning. The man obeys, like the word rewrote his muscles. Power isn't volume. She marks that truth and keeps it, even while she resents where it lives. They reach the bend where fog clots. The world narrows to 3 steps, and a truth she doesn't want. He angles his body to shield her from the sightline to the road where lanterns ring a shape that could be a snare or a sermon. He takes a breath like a man pulling a thorn he put there. Left, he says, almost a whisper. There's a route you can't see until it has your ankle. Step wide, then cut back when you feel the drop. Don't hesitate. He knows the ground the way he knows her tells. It makes her angry in a way that feels like warmth under the anger, and she hates that more. Do you ever stop giving orders? She asks. When they stop saving lives, he says, and that's the kind of sentence that would be arrogant if it weren't also true. She steps where he says. The root gropes for her. She denies it. The drop announces itself as a cool exhale against her shin. She cuts back. Fog parts briefly and gives her a view of the trap at the break. Nets tossed low so a running body will rise into them. Rope slicked with pitch so teeth slide. Men positioned behind trees they didn't plant. She files it. She will need this kind of remembering later. They shelter in the crook of a stunted fir while the fog does them one favor and swallows a scout's gaze. The distance between their shoulders is a fact and a complaint. Her heart won't regulate for him. His hands hang loose but not relaxed. He could move from that posture into kill or cover without changing breath. His throat works around a word he doesn't say. She refuses to fill it for him. Why save me now? She asks again, because time has passed and silence has failed to become an answer. His jaw tightens. The amber in his eyes doesn't dim. It shifts. The emotion under it isn't tidy. It isn't pretty. It looks like a man standing in a burning house and arguing with himself about which room to carry out. The fog beads along his lashes and finally runs. Because the ones who want you dead don't understand what they're asking to live with, he says at last. Because I do. It's not an apology. It's not absolution. It's a confession of a debt he can't name. It lands wrong and right at once, a key to a door she has no intention of opening, and a proof that he remembers the corridor it leads to. Lantern light sweeps the low brush just below them. A man's cough scars the quiet. Farther off, a howl that isn't pack rises, thin and reedy, a pipe made of lungs. The hired quiet is restless. The old forest hums with dislike. Her skin registers the mood shift. The silver inside her wakes again, not flaring, aligning as if there's a pattern in the danger and it recognizes itself in it. She moves, and he moves with her without negotiation, not touching, orbiting. Their bodies find a geometry they learned long before words drew lines between them. The path squeezes and widens. Pine mats down, then springs back. At a squeeze point where rock ribs through the soil, she pauses, just half a breath, weighing the cost of saying a thing that might matter and might ruin. You won't always be able to decide which side of me you're saving, she says softly. He doesn't misunderstand. I already can't, he answers. No drama, no flourish. Just truth laid on wet stone. Steps rake the slope below. Rope hisses, cast and gathered. A voice mutters about bait and patience. He meets her eyes once, only once, and whatever war runs in him shows, and then is gone, because to keep it visible would get them both killed. He tilts his head toward the tight left turn that will spit her into the ribs of the ridge and out of the line of lanterns. She takes it. Fog thins enough at the top to show the skeleton of the hill against a leaking sky. Wind scrubs some of the wet from her hair. Her ankle settles into a rhythm she can tolerate. The silver quiets, not sleeping, not sulking, waiting, as if it understands the part of the night that belongs to restraint. Behind them, a shout snaps and breaks. A net hits a branch with a smack. Someone swears at the dark like it will apologize. She doesn't look back. That has become a habit she can live with. Still, the mind, enemy, and friend pulls the scene on a thread and shows it in her head. Him turning to face the mess he made smaller by being here. Him wearing the coat like armor and penance. Him speaking to men who will swear loyalty until their fear finds a louder bitter. She hates the picture and the ache it drags behind it. She keeps moving. The ridge doesn't care about hearts. It cares about feet. The path evens for 10 tight paces, then pitches into a gravel slide that tries to skate her into open ground. She rides it, knees soft, weight low, the way the old women taught girls whose bodies would have to run. A rock edges out and nicks her calf. The sting is immediate and clean. She breathes through it and lets the pain be proof that she's exactly where she must be. Not safe, not finished, not his. Fog gives ground inch by inch. The trees stand apart enough now that the forest stops feeling like a mouth and starts feeling like an old, wary friend who watches from the porch and doesn't wave. At a stand of spruce that drank lightning one spring and grew stranger for it, she stops beneath their scorched crowns and listens. The hunt below is spreading thin. Men are chasing the noise they made themselves. The hired quiet is learning how loud a forest can be when it wants you lost. A soft rhythm breaks left, footfalls that mean training, not luck. She angles to intercept because sometimes confrontation is the safest way through. The figure resolves out of gray. Not enforcer, not scout, not a man who belongs to this place. The gait is wrong, city knees. He lifts something she doesn't like. She doesn't give him time to name it. She cuts into his space and knocks the object from his hands. It spins, flashes metal and malice, and vanishes into fern. His face breaks in surprise, then fear, then calculation when he sees what she is not willing to be. He goes for his belt. She stamps the inside of his knee and feels the joint give. He howls. The forest enjoys it. She leaves him breathing because death is an attention magnet and she isn't done being ignored. By the time the path folds her into the next run of rock, her pulse has climbed down from frantic to fierce. Her hands shake only when she let them remember. She doesn't let them. The silver burns calmly, a coal under ash, bright enough to be a promise if she ever decides to keep it. Wind lifts and carries a last scrap of his scent up the ridge. Smoke, leather, the bitter edge of choices that bruise, then lets it disperse. He didn't answer her question. Not really. Silence can be architecture. It can also be a wound. Both hold weight, both shape movement. She files his quiet next to his directions and the memory of his body between her and a line of lanterns. She will decide later what any of it means when not dying isn't the immediate task. She tops the ridge. The land on the other side exhales, a long, low valley stitched with black pines, the suggestion of a deer path glimmering with wet. Stormlight bleeds from the clouds, thin as milk. Somewhere a stream talks to flat stones in a dialect that promises cold and cover. Her body names the next needs: water, height, heat. She adjusts the order to suit the hunt and starts down. Behind her, at the bend where fog stacks and men pretend that rope makes them safe, a new roar lifts, not human, not hers. Alpha. It shakes the wet from furs and bats rain from needles. It tells the ridge who owns the moment below. It buys her time. It costs him something he won't count. She doesn't thank him. She uses what he bought. She moves. The valley takes her weight and doesn't argue. The forest trades secrets with itself around her. The night lets its shoulders drop a fraction. The silver in her chest waits for the next choice. She will make the right one for survival, and if that lines up with the one that saves his life, she refuses to name the reason now. The world clears to a narrow band of certainty. One more turn, one more slope, one more breath that doesn't belong to anyone else. The path is a pulse under her feet. The truth is a blade she refuses to sheath in old words. She goes where the ground lets her, and where it doesn't, she makes a way. Dawn doesn't arrive so much as thin the darkness. The valley lies quiet under a pale wash, and the cold tastes cleaner than night. She moves until the trees thicken, until the ground gives her a shallow bowl hidden by windfall and fern, a place where footsteps don't converge. She kneels, collects damp twigs no bigger than fingers, a few curls of dry bark from the underside of a fallen log, and builds a small, stubborn cone like she's building a spine from scraps. The flint she keeps wrapped in cloth kisses steel. The spark falls. The silver inside her answers before the tinder does. An involuntary reach. A quick, warm pressure beneath bone. And then the bark takes the ember and breathes. Flame lifts the smallest face and holds. She could feed it a branch the size of a wrist and have heat. She gives it slivers. Small fire is quiet fire. Quiet keeps you in the world. The light paints hollows under her eyes and throws her past onto the ground like shadows trying to become shapes. Memory doesn't ask permission. It steps forward as if it lives here. A yard beaten flat by 100 games, she was not invited to play. A line of laundry snapping like flags of a nation that never accepted her. The smell of broth that never reached her bowl. She had a corner where the fence leaned and the grass forgot to be grass. She drew circles in the dust with a stick and pretended they were doors. Her hands were always dirty, the kind of dirt that means persistence rather than neglect. Children fear what adults teach them to fear, and the adults had a whole lexicon for her. Special in the tone that means problem. Gifted in the tone that means detonator. Promising in the tone that means keep your distance because the bill will come due. Early shift is a phrase that sounds like pride when told to strangers. Inside the territory, it meant risk. She remembers the day it broke in her. The pressure and the pain and the sudden, startling fact of more. No witness but 2 pigeons and a sky the color of boiled milk. Her bones didn't lengthen so much as relent. Her skin became instruction rather than boundary. Heat wired through her like new law. She remembers the smell of singed hair, where the silver flared without consent. It wasn't beautiful. It was a truth too blunt for anyone's comfort, including her own. They brought her to the elders like a problem wrapped in a girl. The old men's eyes were rheumy, their hands sure. They spoke the names of ancestors as if those names were locks they could turn to keep danger penned. Someone pressed a coin to her palm and told her to hold it until it cooled. Someone else marked her wrist with ash and called it protection while they watched to see if the ash would ignite. It did not then. They nodded, relieved and disappointed. A tool that doesn't perform is harder to file away as threat. The silver flame, she did not name it. The name found her, stayed quiet when she fed the goats and scrubbed the stoop and learned how to sew the heel of a sock so a foot wouldn't blister. It stayed quiet until a boy with no authority tried to take her bread and laughed when she told him to stop. The basket fell. The loaf split. She grabbed his wrist to make her point land, and heat rolled from her palm into his skin like sunlight turned heavy. He yanked back, eyes wide, not in pain. He would later insist he felt none. Only in the shock of a body corrected by a force it couldn't name. The elders called her that night. The coin burned cool in her hand. The ash mark on her wrist smudged when one of them prodded it. The old men looked at one another and said nothing, the kind of nothing that becomes doctrine by morning. Banished is a word with ceremony when people want to believe themselves merciful. Her banishment had no music and no speeches. A hand on her shoulder guided her to the border path. A satchel hung across her chest with half a loaf and flint in the pocket. The fence leaned. The grass pretended to be grass. Someone's voice, gentle because cruelty in a soft tone confuses the prey, told her exile would keep everyone safer, especially her. Safety is so often the name fear gives itself. She stepped past the line and waited for a feeling that would make the moment mean more. The feeling didn't come. The world didn't change its temperature because she moved through a human idea of boundary. She walked until the path blurred and the ache in her calves became a rhythm that said, "You will live if you keep the beat." Scraps taught her their curriculum: how to read a tree for the driest heartwood, how to find water that moves and doesn't lie still with sickness, how to steal from traps without teaching trappers your steps. She learned that every edge in the world has a smaller edge under it. She learned to eat slowly so hunger would respect her. Nights were worst until she understood that worst can be trained. She tamed the dark by conduction, back pressed to stone, shins pressed to shins, breath pressed into math. The flame inside her learned discipline under the same law as the stomach. When there is little, you do not demand much. When there is danger, you do not announce yourself. He doesn't arrive in memory as a face first. He is a scent and a weight on the air, the sensation of a boundary tightening not because you approached it, but because it moved to meet you. Then his outline, then the eyes, then everything else a mind resists cataloging because naming makes permanence. The first time he crossed to where she slept, back braced, knees to chest, hand on flint, he said nothing. He assessed the fire she was coaxing and the distance between that small, obedient heat and the thing in her that might overrun it. He didn't sit. He stood long enough for her pulse to shape itself into something controlled. He left without leaving any food. Gifts complicate what the giver intends to own. When the council called the bond, when the old words that describe who belongs to whom scrape their way through the den, she did not feel surprise. She felt a kind of relief, like standing under eaves while rain hardens and thinking you have found the right ratio of shelter and sound. He looked at her like the idea of her pressed against his ribs. The pack murmured. A girl with fire will fickle. A man built like the law will steady her. Perhaps their halves will make a safe whole. The elders, relieved at a narrative that turned fear into prophecy, overseen, nodded with the same mouths that had told her to live alone. There is a particular cruelty to hope when the floor hasn't been inspected for rot. His rejection did not arrive as a shout. It came like weather turning at noon, a shift in light, a drop in pressure. The realization that the sky had been building a storm behind the blue while you were looking someplace else. They stood on the cliff where voices travel. Snow ate sound and offered it back brighter. He looked from her to the line of trees and back, as if checking whether the world matched the map. He said, "You will destroy us all." No rage, no plea. Assessment. The sentence lay between them like a drawn blade he was too disciplined to point. She felt the words move through her and out the other side. She did not bleed then because some wounds prefer to collect their due with interest. She built a life at the edge like a patient craftsman, a shelter no one would notice unless they slept as low as she did. Roots that changed by week, caches of water sealed with stones and mud, a habit of looking up before looking down, because danger often starts in the treetops where authority roosts. The silver flame took instruction. It became a thing she could turn from knife to needle, to thread in the space of a breath if she had to. She stitched herself together so many times she forgot the first pattern. The fire in front of her now lifts, bends, corrects itself, the way a body learns grace by being denied it. Heat slides into her face and makes honesty easier. She thinks of the boys who wrote their names on trees and believed trees would keep their secrets. She thinks of the women who hid their skill in chores because men feel generous when they do not see competence. She thinks of elders who bartered fear for order and called the trade sacred. She thinks of him at the bend in the path last night, taking the place where rope would have seen her, speaking directions soft enough not to disturb the part of her that wants to disagree on principle. Regret is a quiet guest. It takes up space without noise. It sat in his eyes last night like someone invited but not fed. He looked at her as if the version of himself who said the cliff sentence had been living in his chest and scratching the walls ever since. She hates that she can read him. She hates that the reading still matters. She stares into flame until her reflection breaks and recombines and refuses to stabilize. Children fear what adults teach them to fear. She learned to fear herself because all the adults agreed it was reasonable. The lesson burrowed deep. On nights when the wind moved wrong and the world felt like thin glass, she practiced not becoming a blaze. On days when hunger made her hands unreliable, she practiced holding heat without letting it leak into anything living. Her control wasn't talent. It was craft learned under surveillance. She won't give the council credit for the skill they forced. She will keep the skill as hers. Was he right? The question doesn't wear punctuation in her mind. It stands there, blunt, hating flourish. If the flame in her ever breaks rank, there won't be a council left to sneer or bless. She knows this the way a carpenter knows where a house will creak before it does. She also knows that the only time it has spilled in harm was when someone insisted on being the lesson. The boy with the loaf grabbing, the enforcer with the hungry eyes. Threat taught answers. Fire obeyed geometry, pressure, oxygen, spark. The rest was instruction. The uncertain shelter in the valley keeps its bargain for now. Light pushes through clouds and bruised beams and rinses the ground enough to make track reading complicated for anyone who isn't her. She breaks the fire down to a glow, caps it in a shallow scrape with damp earth, and rubs ash into her palms to flatten the scent of flight. Ash has its own truth. Everything is temporary at the right temperature. The silver inside her lifts once, as if checking whether it's still permitted to participate, then sinks with the sense of a disciplined animal who has learned that patience wins more than hunger does. She shoulders the satchel that no longer carries a loaf because night took it, moves to leave, then stops because departure at the exact moment you plan. It is a habit the hunt loves. She waits a count, shifts her weight to a different foot, then steps into brush that will slap her legs the way previous choices do. The first breeze brings him again, copper and smoke stretched thin by distance. The blood doesn't speed. It tightens like a fist preparing around nothing. Something about his gaze now. Not cruelty, regret seeded with duty, watered with restless nights. She would rather deal with cruelty. At least it keeps its shape. Regret warps. It makes generous gestures that hide hooks. It makes men stand in fog and give directions like they have earned the right. It also makes them take hits that weren't meant for anyone and pretend the bruises were free. She does not forgive him because she cannot forgive a version of herself that might say yes to the man who wore that gaze. She can, however, inventory the fact of it. Facts are useful later when heat rises. She steps into the day that isn't bright yet and lets the forest lay its cool hand on her face. The path is not kind, but it is consistent. Her feet like consistency. Her mind likes it less, but accepts the bargain. The silver inside her hums low, a machine at idle, patient, and dangerous, and intimately hers. If she ever uses it to end what others started, she will not do it because a council told her she was permitted, or because an alpha finally understood the math of loving something that can burn him. She will do it because she has lived at the edge long enough to know that edges are where things sharpen. Somewhere behind her, a howl lifts and flattens into command. He is doing what he was raised to do. Somewhere ahead, a creek writes another code over stones she hasn't read. She moves toward the unwritten because the written chapters have been ugly and repetitive, and she is done being anyone's cautionary tale. If redemption exists, and she doesn't owe the word anything, it will look like control she built herself, and mercy she rations on purpose. It will not look like returning to a den that taught her to tuck her fire under her tongue until she swallowed sparks and called it obedience. She doesn't pray. She counts. Steps, choices, breaths, weighs out. She keeps enough in her hands to strike flame when night demands it, and enough in her chest to deny it when safety requires restraint. If he steps into her path again, she will treat him as she treats a ridge she must cross. Measure the angle, test the hold. Use what helps, discard what breaks skin. Empathy is not a surrender. It is a map that includes cliffs. The day raises its pale head and looks her over. She looks back with the steadiness of someone who knows exactly what she survived and who will not be told again that her survival endangered the world more than the men who cast her out. The silver flame shifts under her sternum, not hungry, not sorry, ready. She lets it be. She lets herself be. Then she keeps moving, because stillness is for firelight and reckoning, and she has a long walk toward a version of herself that belongs to no one's fear. The valley does not release her easily. Its trees knit so tight that light filters down in fractured strands, pale beams bending through mist as if the forest wants to keep its secrets. Each step she takes pulls her deeper, and the ground begins to change. Roots bow upward like ribs, stones rise in strange alignments. The air thickens until breath feels weighted. It isn't just wilderness anymore. The earth hums with a vibration low enough to settle in bone, steady enough to make skin prickle. She knows this kind of place. She's heard it in whispers traded between the old women when they thought she slept. Sacred ground, a place where bloodlines declare themselves whether you want them to or not. She slows, instinct bristling. The path narrows into a corridor of pines that seem older than the pack itself, their trunks blackened with age, bark carved by storms and claws. A hollow opens ahead, ringed with stone that gleams damp and dark, each slab leaning slightly inward as if listening. At the center, a raised altar of rock, its surface carved with spirals and runes, worn half smooth by centuries of weather. She does not need to step closer to know the shape etched there will match the mark on her wrist. Still, she approaches, pulse running too fast for comfort. Her hand trembles as she pulls back her sleeve. The mark burns faintly in the firelight. Silver lines curled into a pattern she never chose, branded into her skin since birth. When she lays her wrist above the carving, the lines answer each other. The rune on stone ignites, Not in flame, but in light, silver white like a star pulled low. It doesn't consume, it doesn't flicker. It holds steady, as though it recognizes her, as though it has been waiting. The air thickens with voices that don't come from throats. They slither through the wind, half word, half echo, old as the first howl in the first night. She cannot decipher all of it, but one thread rises clear, sharp as a blade dragged across stone. When the silver fire burns, the lost will rise, and the Alpha must choose. The words settle in her chest like chains and wings at once. She staggers back a step, unsure if she's standing on holy ground or her own grave. Salvation or curse, she cannot tell. Her breath shivers in her lungs. For a moment, she believes she hears her mother's voice, faint, broken by memory, warning her that too much fire never ends in warmth. He stands behind her close enough that his breath moves the hair at her temple. He has watched her bear the mark, watched the stone reply, and something changes in his face. Not shock. Recognition, grim and inevitable, like a secret he has kept too long. The elders always feared this, he says quietly, voice roughened by truth. The prophecy spoke of a girl of flame who would end the line of alphas. They said if she lived, the packs would fracture. They said the throne of blood would burn. She turns, meeting his eyes, furious and wounded all at once. So they cast me out to keep themselves safe. He doesn't answer at first. His silence is enough. Then he admits, low, "They cast you out because they believed you would unmake me." The words drive deep. All her life she has carried rejection like a second spine, but now she sees its architecture. Not mistake, not accident, a deliberate decision to cut her away before destiny could claim them both. Her hand lifts despite herself, fingers tracing the glowing stone. He reaches too, palms steady, calloused from battles and burdens. Their hands brush against the same line of rune. It is the light that betrays them, flaring brighter where their skin touches, weaving their shadows together on the cave wall, as if the prophecy itself recognizes bond, where they only feel confusion. Heat climbs her throat, not the silver fire, but something more fragile, more dangerous. His gaze drops to their joined reflection. She pulls her hand back, but the light lingers, pulsing as if alive. Intimacy, she thinks, though she dares not say it. Or doom. The stone doesn't care which. It remembers the prophecy and sings it back in silence, humming against the floor, vibrating up through their bones. She stares at him across the altar, her chest tight with the knowledge that she is tied to something larger than exile, larger than him, larger even than her own survival. The earth has named her, whether she wants it or not, and he is the one destined to choose. The grove should have been quiet. Sacred ground holds its breath when the marked one arrives. But by dusk, word had spread faster than fog. Torches burned in the ring of stones, their smoke climbing into the canopy and choking the night air. Wolves gathered, two-legged, some still raw with fur bristling under skin, others fully shifted, teeth catching firelight. It wasn't ceremony, it was trial. She stepped into the circle, and the hum of the earth bent sharper, like a drumbeat racing. He walked beside her, Alpha's shoulders squared, but the eyes around them weren't reverent. They were sharp with suspicion. Rival Alphas from neighboring packs stood at the edges, arms crossed, waiting to see if prophecy would hand them a weapon to wield. The first voice cut the silence. "She's cursed." The words struck harder than claws. Murmurs followed, growing louder, sharper, a tide of judgment she had drowned in before. "She will burn us all. She should never have returned." She is the prophecy, not its answer. Every accusation thickened the air until it pressed her lungs tight. Some faces burned with anger, others stayed blank, silent, watching, weighing. Silence was worse. It meant calculation. He stepped forward, voice steady as a blade balanced on its edge. She carries the mark. You see it. You feel the earth answer her. If prophecy lives, she is the proof. You don't destroy proof. The elders shifted uneasily. One raised his staff. The mark is flame, not salvation. A girl of fire ends lines. She does not heal them. You would defend the hand that could burn your throne to ash? She felt the weight of eyes turning toward him, waiting, eager to see fracture. He didn't falter, but she saw the muscle in his jaw tighten, saw how his hand flexed open, then closed again at his side, as though he wanted to reach for her and refused himself. Before he could answer, the torches hissed, guttered, and smoke whipped sideways in a wind that did not belong to weather. The shadows between the stones stretched and swelled. From them, things crawled, beasts that had no pack, shapes twisted, eyes hollow, their bodies made from dark and hunger. The first scream came from the outer ring as one beast lunged, ripping through flesh like dry bark. Chaos shattered the gathering. Wolves shifted mid-leap, claws meeting shadows, teeth clashing with void. Firelight and blood tangled in the frenzy. She moved without thinking. The silver inside her surged, rising too fast, demanding air. She tried to control it, to release enough to scorch the beasts, but not the wolves around them. It broke from her chest in a burst, silver flame lashing outward. Shadow beasts shrieked and burned to nothing. But a man too close, an ally, caught the edge of it. His shoulder blistered, skin splitting in heat. His howl was not victory, it was pain. She staggered, horrified, hands clamped against her ribs as if she could drag the fire back inside. But it clawed again, eager, reckless. Another wave burst, this one striking two enemies, and a girl from the council who had raised her hand to shield her face. Both dropped. The shadow dissolved. The girl collapsed, sobbing, skin charred. Gasps tore through the circle louder than the battle. "She burns her own! Curse! Monster!" Her body shook. The flame inside her raging like it had waited for this very chance to prove their fear right. She pressed her palms to the dirt, tried to smother it, tried to cage it back. The ground steamed. Her breath came out in searing waves. He fought beside her, his strength brutal, his strikes precise. Claws raked down a beast's throat. Blood sprayed his cheek. Still, he found her through the chaos, bellowing her name with a force that cut through the noise. "Stand with me!" She lifted her eyes to him. His stance was defiance itself, body between her and those who now shouted not at the beasts, but at her. "Choose your people!" The council roared above the din. "Choose your pack, or choose the cursed girl." The words weren't just warning, they were sentence. His shoulders squared, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw the answer in his face. Saw him choose her. But the hesitation that followed sliced deeper than any blade. He looked at the crowd, then back at her, caught between the blood he had been born to and the fire fate had tethered him to. The beasts fell one by one, but the damage was done. When silence finally limped back into the circle, the stones reeked of ash and blood. Bodies lay twisted, some burned by her, some broken by shadow. Eyes did not look at her as survivor. They looked at her as proof of the curse. An elder's